Can you hear me? Hello, Gail. Hey, Gail. Can you hear me? Hello? Hello, Gail. Hey, Gail. Hi. Okay, you can hear me. Can you speak? Let me see if I can hear you.
Hi, Haley.
There we go. Okay. I just want to make sure. I know I don't need to speak, but I was wanting to make sure the audio was good.
I don't know how to tell you that they're going to move the slides when I'm afraid they won't tell you when to move the slides forward. So it may have to be a bit intuitive.
I mean, I'll do my best, but hopefully they will just tell me. So hopefully everyone knows how to do that by this point. Also, people are in the waiting room. I'm not letting, I wanted to ask if you wanted me to let people in or if you wanted time to figure stuff out.
No, I think we're set. I want Melissa. Is Melissa there?
No, she's not.
Okay, because she should be starting the meeting on time, which is like 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Could you see my screen a minute ago when I was sharing?
Uh-huh.
Okay,
Yeah.
I will go ahead and pull that back up. For some reason, I couldn't see your video, so I'm not sure. Let's see.
Pull it back up.
Yeah. Okay, there's your video. Okay, so screen good.
Yep.
I will put myself on mute and I'm gonna go ahead and let everyone in if that's okay.
That's great.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Haley is our administrator and she's reminding me that when we need to go to the next slide, that we need to tell her so. So I'm hoping that others will remember that. If not, I'll speak up.
Hi, Gail, I'm here.
You can start anytime, Melissa. It's
All
great to
right.
see you.
Thank you. And we're going with the annotated agenda from version 2.
We're going with the annotated version that I sent,
Yesterday.
I don't know, about 10 minutes ago. This is, as you know, there's one called final.
Okay. All right, well, hopefully I'm pretty much the same because I don't see that in my email.
It's pretty much the same.
Okay,
You'll be fine.
okay. All right, well, welcome everyone. I'm Melissa Batchelor. I'm the director for the Center for Aging, Health and Humanities at GW. And this is the November 16th Age-Friendly DC Task Force meeting. And the Center for Aging is hosting this meeting. So if you need assistance with joining the video or audio portion of this meeting, you can call Haley Stepp at 704-691-4498, and she will help you with any tech assistance. This is a virtual only meeting, and we're hoping maybe by the next one that we'll be able to meet in person on the GW campus. But we'll probably end up doing some type of blended environment just because it's easier and makes it more accessible for people to have both options. Please make sure that you keep your microphone on mute. And if you can use the chat function to make any comments, ask any questions, and Haley and I will be monitoring that chat and we'll forward any questions probably towards the end of the meeting. And then there will be a public comment section at the end. And any questions that we don't get to during the meeting, Gail Cohn will compile those and get the responses back out to everyone. So it's my pleasure to introduce the co-chair of James Appleby of the Age-Friendly DC Task Force, who will be the facilitator of this meeting. James is the president and chief executive officer of the Gerontological Society of America, which just held their annual conference last week. And welcome, James, you appear to have survived.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Melissa. And thank you for hosting this meeting. The GWS Center for Aging, Health and Humanities is a valued age-friendly DC partner, and you've done a remarkable job of helping us make these meetings happen, especially in this virtual environment that we're living in for now. Before I begin the meeting, though, I'd like to commend the GWS Center for the amazing work that you've been doing here in the Washington, D.C. regional area to host two different regional summits in 2021. And these summits are really, I think, are putting the D.C. metro area on the map. And the leadership that you've provided there at GW has just been remarkable, and it's greatly appreciated. I wonder, for the benefit of task force members who maybe couldn't participate and for members of the public with us, could you say a few words about those summits, Melissa?
Sure. Haley, we want to move to the next slide because that should be the beginning of my. Okay, yes. So in 2021, in May of 2021, was the first time that we really had an event where we brought together regional age-friendly partners. So at Gail's request, many of you know, when Gail tells you to do something, you just do it. But she connected me with age-friendly Alexandria, Arlington, Hyattsville, and Montgomery County. Next slide. And so this group met together for 6 to 8 months, probably, planning this event, and began to develop an age-friendly ecosystem summit, which came from our first meetings back in 2019, where we kind of developed what our priorities were going to be for this region. And so the figure on the right is really how in our region, how we're defining what an age-friendly ecosystem looks like. Many of you are familiar with age-friendly municipalities and the 12 domains of livability, but there are 5 other age-friendly initiatives that we've incorporated into our work. Next slide, Haley. So what we did for the Ecosystem Summit, we had a 2-day event. Prior to the event, I had recorded a series of 13 podcasts with nationally recognized age-friendly leaders. And then in the next couple of slides, I'm going to show you some links to those. And then for the second day, we had regional leaders present kind of what's been going on in the age-friendly space within the age-friendly domains. And then on day 2, each of the 5 age-friendly municipalities presented a 10-minute TED Talk about their best practices. Next slide. So these slides will be available to you after this event. What you see here and these are all hyperlinked. So if you just open the PowerPoint, you can find them. You can listen to these. Next slide, Haley. And then also other places you can find the podcast include my website, which has a written blog that goes with it. You can follow me on any social media platform that I'm on, or these 4 different podcast platforms to listen on the go, but they're free, available to the public. So you can put them in newsletters, disseminate them, but it's all work that that came out of the Age Friendly Ecosystem Summit. Next slide. So then in October, we had the Age Friendly Ecosystem. Oh, well, sorry. So if you want to learn more about what was done with the Ecosystem Summit, we did put this into an online course, and you can get continuing education credit for it if you pay the $100 fee. If you don't want continuing education credit, you can pay $50. And there's the code to do that. But all proceeds from this event go towards the Gene Cohen Research Award, which is a scholarship to support a student doing research in kind of the age-friendly space. Next slide. For I guess it was 2 weeks ago, we had a grant funded by the AARP, a community challenge grant. There were 3,560 applications nationally. They funded 244. DC was fortunate enough to get one of those. So we work with AARP, DC, Virginia, Maryland, and next slide, with our same age-friendly partners that we worked on the summit with. But we added 2 other academic partners that are the Honey Nashman Center for Civic Engagement and Public Service, as well as Georgetown University's Aging and Health Program. So we're picking up more partners as we go. Next slide. For this event, okay, well, I guess I'm missing some slides. I'll just tell you, there's 3 slides missing here. The goal of this was to bring an intergenerational group of people together to come up with new ideas about what we need to be doing over the next 25 years around the age-friendly domains. That was also a 2-day, that was a 1-day event. And if you're following the podcast over the next 4 months, we'll be putting out 1 process and outcome video about what we did with the Age-Friendly Social Innovation Challenge. And each of the domains will have its own podcast. So all of those will come out between now and the end of March of 2022. And that's it. Back to you, James.
Thank you, Melissa. That was a whirlwind tour. And I don't know about others on the call, but I've really become a big fan of podcasts during the past 18 months. And the podcast that Melissa hosts is just wonderful. If you have not tried it, I really encourage you to subscribe and enjoy it. It's really, really well done. I did want to say a word about the GSA annual scientific meeting. So next slide, please. That was mentioned by Melissa. So as a reminder, my professional responsibilities are as CEO of the Gerontological Society of America. It's a group that represents all the experts in aging, essentially, here in the United States across all disciplines. We just wrapped up our 4-day meeting that had 3,700 participants from 34 different countries around the world. It was online. And I just mention it because there were dozens of different presentations that touch on aspects of either age-friendly communities, age-friendly health systems, age-friendly public health, age-friendly universities. So just so you know that it's very much this whole conversation about DC being age-friendly, and now the work that Melissa's leading, making the whole region age-friendly, is very much part of the conversation at these national and international conferences, that age-friendliness is the future. And it's not about really even just being age-friendly per se, but it's about creating systems and environments that help us across our whole life course to age effectively. It's not just about particular age 65 and up, but across aging across that life course. And again, it's very much on the agendas of all the major scientific organizations and experts. Next slide, please. As you'll see here is the link to the Age-Friendly DC agenda. And so you should be able to access it there if you've not been able to. I'd like to now officially call the meeting to order. And on behalf of Mayor Muriel Bowser, who established the Age-Friendly DC Task Force, I want to welcome the DC government and community members here. As you recall, this is a multi-sector initiative that brings together representatives from the private and community sector together with DC government in order to find ways to collaborate and to advance this initiative to make DC a truly age-friendly city. For those of you who are joining, there's so many different people joining. I'd encourage you, if you would, use the chat function to introduce yourselves. You can just put your name there, your affiliation, and the age-friendly DC domain that you're focusing on. If you could just put it there, that'll give everyone a sense of who's been able to join us here for our fall meeting. Well, I'm also pleased to say that we will have the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services with us today. He's the co-chair of this Age-Friendly DC Task Force, and it's Wayne Turnage. We had a chance to meet with Wayne a couple of months ago, and I just will tell you, he's passionate about the work of this task force, and he and his staff have been very supportive in helping to continue to nurture along this work and to make sure that he keeps moving forward to achieve the mayor's objectives for it. I also want to make sure we note that Gail Cohn is with us. She's the Age-Friendly DC coordinator. She is what energizes everything, I believe, personally, about the work of the task force and making sure that we are moving forward and making sure we're not leaving any stone unturned in terms of partners we can bring in or initiatives we can take to try to fully realize the idea of a truly age-friendly DC. So Gail, thank you for being with us. We also have 3 new members of the Age-Friendly DC Task Force, which I will briefly introduce. They were recently appointed by Mayor Muriel Bowser to the task force. And they include Jennifer Olney. She's been appointed to serve as our philanthropy expert. Jennifer is on the Greater Washington Community Foundation staff. So welcome, Jennifer. Also, Stacy Kanan, who was appointed to focus on the caregiving domain. She has been working with caregiving issues throughout her career. And finally, Teresa Silla was appointed to the Age-Friendly Task Force in her new role as head of the Interagency Commission on Homelessness. So welcome, Teresa. We now have a quorum present of task force members who are participating in this virtual meeting. I'm pleased to welcome also our visitors. As a reminder, the public is always welcome to participate and observe the Age-Friendly DC Task Force meetings. If you have questions, again, encourage you to use the chat function so everyone can see your questions. Please enter the questions or comments if you have those in the chat function, along with your contact information so that we can have appropriate follow-up. And as a reminder, at the end of our meeting today, there will be a segment for responses from the public for questions and comments. Again, please use the chat feature so all can see the questions. Dr. Melissa Batchelor and her colleague Hallie Stepp will batch the questions as much as possible so that we can have an efficient response to the input from the public. And any comments or questions that we don't get to during the meeting, we will follow up with a response later this week. Next slide, please. As those of you who are familiar with the Age-Friendly DC Task Force know, the agenda for our meetings have in the past featured a report on progress from each of the many domains. That's each of the smaller work streams that are out there. We're going to depart from that here in November and instead just have one report from each of the major pillars, each of the 3 pillars. We think that will give us a chance to dig a little deeper into that area of inquiry and see where there might be touch points across all the different domains that influence that pillar. And so it's a little bit of a departure from what we've tried in the past. We used it, I think, somewhat successfully earlier this year, so we're going to try it again this year. I will note, though, that you each should have received slides that were prepared on each of the many different domains. So one slide per domain was prepared to capture the progress over the past year in that domain. So I encourage you to review those slides and you can pick up a lot of insights as to what has been accomplished at the domain level. So don't forget to do that. If you did not receive them, you can also find them at www.agefriendly.dc.gov. So again, the agenda today is going to feature a report from each of the 3 age-friendly pillars. Next slide, please. As is shown here, again, the work of the task force is organized into these 3 pillars. Each pillar has numerous domains that support that pillar, and you can see them on the slide here and get a sense as to how this extensive, comprehensive work around becoming age-friendly is organized into these 3 pillars and these many domains supporting them. Again, each domain has completed that slide on the work they've accomplished in fiscal year 2021. So please go ahead and access those to get insights. Next slide. In order to I'm sorry, go back one slide if you would, please. In order to kick us off today, our conversation is going to focus on Pillar 1. And the Pillar 1 domain is the built environment. And of course, the built environment pillar includes the aims, goals, and strategies of 3 different domains. And those domains are outdoor spaces and buildings, transportation, and housing. Each of those domains is quite large, but all 3 of them wrap up into that one pillar of the built environment. And this really accounts for the human-made structures that affect where we live, where we work, and where we play. And today, our focus under Pillar 1 is going to be on how accessory dwelling units could change DC into a more affordable city, how accessory dwelling units could change DC into a more affordable city. We're pleased to have Tammy Duffy-Day, who's a member of the Age-Friendly DC Task Force, join us to discuss this topic. And Tama will be facilitating this panel discussion. And just before I turn it over to you, Tama, just to let you know, I'll be going off screen, and then I will reappear on screen when it becomes time for us to move on to pillar number 2. So with that, next slide, please. And I would say, Tama, can you take it from here?
Absolutely. Thank you, James.
Thank you.
So we are representing Pillar 1 on the built environment, as you have said, and I have 2 great speakers with me today. So Cheryl and Michael, if you wouldn't mind turning your cameras on and unmuting, and I will just take a moment to give a brief introduction. So I am on the Age-Friendly DC Task Force, Tama Duffy-Day, and with me are 2 speakers, Cheryl Court, who is the policy director at the Coalition for Smarter Growth and is their voice on equitable development campaigns. She will speak first, and then Michael Brown. Michael Brown is the Residential Center Manager and Permit Operations Division in the DC Department of Regulatory Offices in the Code Construction Office. So Cheryl, if we would advance to the next slide, I'll let you do your discussion first.
Great. And then, so you'll do the, oh, there it is. Great. Well, thanks for having me. I'm Cheryl Court with the Coalition for Smarter Growth, and we have been working on the opportunity of accessory dwelling units for quite a number of years. Can you advance the next slide, please? So to kind of give you a start at the status, the 2016 update to our older zoning code, which was done in 1958, made 3 major changes permitting small housing types. One is it allowed 1 accessory apartment in a single family residential zone. In row house zones, known as residential flat zones or maybe residential apartment zones, it allows one of the usually 2, well, in the RF, it's 2, generally allows 2 units. One of those units can now be allowed in like a carriage house or garage, which was not allowed until 2016. And then the third is that alley lots can also be used for a house. Next slide, please. And so, we we worked on these reforms, and then we formed a work group early on to figure out, well, how do we implement this and what are our goals? And so broadly, our goals are to bring ADU production to scale in the city. And we see the most important benefits from this is to build wealth for low and moderate income homeowners, and also to create affordable dwelling units. And I'll note that certainly one of the important arguments here is that that we can help moderate low income homeowners age in place, adapt their homes to meet different phases of their lives, and use extra space that could be for income, or a household could adapt space, build space to be used, say, to care for a aging family member who could also still have some privacy and independence. Next slide, please. So, looking at, well, how do we do this? My job is usually to sort of rally around advocating for changing policies, and less so on the sort of the implementation side. But when it comes to accessory dwelling units, we essentially need to take every homeowner and turn them into a developer, basically. And so, our focus was, how do we remove barriers and educate people about the opportunity, and then support them to follow through on the process. And so, the barriers that we see as challenges are understanding zoning, being able to move through the permitting process, understanding how to finance these units. On education, we launched a lot of different kinds of events to educate people, a lot of these workshops, homeowner workshops in different parts of the city, or a centralized one, also doing one-on-one consultations. And we created an online forum so that would share information. It's a good meeting place between homeowners who are interested in this and who have knowledge about these things. And so it's a good way to learn things and share information, and identify problems and look for solutions. And then my internet connection is unstable, so I hope you we actually published a manual partnering with United Planning Organization. You've been a terrific partner in this. And also they supported 2 low and moderate income homeowners building out ADUs as well as part of a pilot project. Next slide, please. Here's a cover of the manual, and we are actually working on with UPO. We're collaborating on an update to the manual, probably in an addendum form. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just sort of do the kind of a little bit on the zoning piece, and then turn it over to Mike Brown, who is in charge of how these units get permitted. So it's important, people get confused about zoning. It is kind of confusing. So in the manual, we try to develop a lot of illustrations to help people understand what are we talking about. So the R is for residential house zone, and that's single family houses. It can be attached or detached. That's actually the largest land area in the city. That's where one accessory apartment, that's actually the technical term, accessory apartment, is allowed inside that home, or say in the backyard. RF is the residential flat zone, which allows 2 principal dwellings, one of which can be located within an accessory building, like a garage, carriage house, or a freestanding cottage in the backyard. And then the RA, residential apartment zone, it has multiple zones, multiple dwellings, but it's similar to the RF. Like this photo is actually from my block, which is a mix of apartment buildings and row houses. Next slide. So here are sort of like the scenarios. So one is typically you're going to build out an apartment, or you're going to maybe renovate a garage and convert it into a living unit. So that basement apartment in the R zone would be called an accessory dwelling unit, or an accessory apartment. If it's in the RF zone, the residential flat zone, it would be one of 2 principal dwellings. It's not technically an accessory dwelling. And so that's a little bit confusing, because there's language around saying RF does not have accessory dwellings. That actually is a little bit of a debate, but that's a very obscure debate that we're not going to have here. So generally, the rule of thumb is that there's just some implications from the zoning about whether or not it's an accessory to a principal dwelling, which is requires owner occupancy, or it's a second principal dwelling, which does not require owner occupancy, meaning you can be a landlord and rent out both units. If it's in the backyard, like a garage conversion, it would be an accessory apartment in an accessory building. In either case, but in RF zone, it would just be a second principal dwelling, which is one of the important changes to the RF zone, allowing the use of a accessory building for a dwelling. Next slide. And this is a little bit too detailed, but we can share this. This is actually an update to a drawing in our manual that there are a couple of clarifications and some changes the Zoning Commission made last year that rules around the accessory permissions related to the accessory building. Basically, the accessory building in the backyard needs to be 7.5 feet away from the alley center line. That it used to be 12 feet from the alley center line. So the Zoning Commission has liberalized that rule, made it less restrictive. It also allows for the building height for that accessory building to now be 22 feet rather than 20 feet. That is also obviously sort of liberalizing things. It did clarify that you have to go to the Board of Zoning Adjustments if that accessory building encroaches on the required rear yard. And the required rear yard is the space between the principal dwelling going back towards the backyard of the property, which is a little bit confusing. So that's why we did an illustration that is where the required rear yard is. It's not a setback. And that if you are inside of that zone, you would have to go to the Board of Zoning Adjustments for a special exception, which is actually not a huge deal, though it is definitely a bit of a regulatory barrier. Next slide, please. Oh, actually, I want to say one more thing about this. Go back. So the footprint of that accessory building, the rule is that an accessory building can't be more than 450 square feet. That's actually not a big space. And talking to architects who are designing these living units, they say, while it is possible to design a 450 square foot building to be accessible, say wheelchair accessible, it is not ideal. It's not really great. And so we've actually worked with some architects to propose to the Zoning Commission that we change that, or we've started with the Office of Planning, change that to a larger number, maybe 650 square feet, if it is meeting some minimal standards of accessible design. And that is kind of held up in other things going on with revamping this, how the zoning code is presented. But that's certainly an agenda that I just wanted to flag for an age-friendly city, that this is something that we think is actually an important component to really kind of fulfilling the opportunity, better fulfilling the opportunity for accessory dwellings to support accessible units for aging in place or having age-friendly designs. Because next slide, please. Because there are 4 main ways that we're building these accessory apartments. One is we're renovating garages. This is a picture of a renovated garage. It is a 450 square foot footprint garage as a 1-bedroom. It is probably the least expensive way to do this. Secondly, renovating an existing basement is probably the second least expensive, as long as we're not talking about having to do underpinning and scooping out to get the proper ceiling height. And then the more expensive ways are freestanding new accessory building or excavating a basement. And so, and basically the rule of thumb is that it costs about $150,000 for typical cost to do this kind of whatever you do, unless you're doing something more expensive, basically, or maybe something a little bit cheaper, but sort of around there. And so, you know, we would, so just again, I reiterate, like, one sort of policy agenda we have from a zoning reform perspective is to look at to allowing a larger footprint in exchange for an accessible accessory building, basically. So that's sort of where I was going to leave things, and Mike maybe has a way for us to get to lower cost ADUs.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Great. Next slide, please. My name is Michael Brown. I'm the manager of the Residential Plan Review Center at DCRA, and I want to talk a little bit about that and how that came about. A couple of years ago, I am the green building manager as well, but I kept hearing from customers that we weren't doing a good job for 1 and 2 family homeowners. So I started holding some seminars over a summer and early fall with one of my partners at work. And what we heard from 100 people were showing up at each one, and about 125 on video, or we're watching this on streaming. And this is all pre-COVID, by the way. Is that one, there's a lot of questions and misconceptions out there about construction codes and what people have to do to do things legally in the District of Columbia. Secondly, a lot of people are being taken advantage of by unscrupulous contractors, architects, engineers, because they didn't know better. And 3, we weren't doing a good job of telling people they were being taken advantage of. So I opened my mouth and said, we need to do something for them, and congratulations, Mike, you have a new job. The purpose of the residential center at its core is to help 1 and 2 family people get through the permitting process so that they can do work legally and safely, quickly, and not have to spend expensive amounts of money. The other thing that came up from that series of meetings we held, or trainings, plus what's happened in the last year since we started the residential center, is that there is a lot of misconceptions about what it takes to have an apartment. If you talk to anybody out on the street, they don't say the word accessory dwelling unit. They don't say 2-family flat. They say, I want an apartment so I can make some money. And that's really the way I approach it when we, in my team, we approach it in that manner with folks. They want an apartment so they can make some money, bottom line. They want an apartment so they can make some money so they can stay in their home. It's a huge group of people. You know, there's a lot of talk that's $150,000, $200,000 to do an accessory dwelling unit, put an apartment in their basements. I'm here to tell you that 50% of the apartments I see being put in basements are doing it for less than $50,000 because they're poor and they don't have access to capital and they don't overbuild their basement. When I see $150,000, $200,000 accessory dwelling units, apartments, what I see are people who are building out something really nice and they want to think that they could live in it. But that's not really what a large segment of the population wants to do. That same segment of the population that does it for $50,000 does not permit it and does not get a business license. So that's the other thing that we have to try and accomplish. Next slide, please. So for single family homes, long-term rentals, this is people who want to have an apartment so they can make money. There's accessory dwelling units in these low density areas. And their requirements are a business license, water and electric shutoff, not a separate meter, but just the ability to turn off the water and the ability to turn off the electricity in their apartments. They have to have a place to eat. They have to have a sink and permanent cooking. I'll tell you what happens in, if they're doing it's a lower income person, they're not putting in a full stove and oven. What they're doing is putting in a hardwired, smaller cooking unit for a few $100s. And then a few $100s for the electricity. They have to have a bathroom with a shower or a tub, toilet and a sink, a bedroom, and then 2 direct methods of egress to an open space. If you have a bad bedroom closed in, then one of those direct methods of egress has to be a window. But what you'll see in a lot of the homes where they're trying to build the apartment a little cheaper is they have two methods of exiting. They don't put a wall or door on the bedroom. They have an efficiency unit, and they don't have to blow out the wall on the back to make a bigger window. So those are some of the ways people do things cheaper. Next slide, please. So single-family homes and long-term rentals, those are the high-density areas that Cheryl was talking about. They have the fancy letters RA, RF, that kind of stuff. The only difference in terms of what is needed for building codes is a certificate of occupancy. So there's a group of folks who over time get caught having illegal apartments in their houses. Oftentimes they got caught because the renter may have complained or a neighbor complained. We go out there and find out that they don't have a license. When people don't have a license for either a two-family flat or an accessory dwelling unit, depending on where they're zoned, we have a way to help them. And I want to go to the next slide and talk about that a second. Before I jump there, I do want to bring up sleeping rooms, because this is an area that, one, is hardly anybody gets licenses for, but it's a very cheap way for somebody to be able to have rental income, and that's renting out their bedrooms. They have to have a business license. It has to be a bedroom that's labeled on the building permit at some time in life as a bedroom. It has to have a closet and an exit window, use of bathroom facilities, use of the kitchen, and zoning is going to require one designated parking space for every 2 rooms you lease or rent. That is an underrepresented group that is, one, legalized, and two, thought of as a way to get income to be able to stay at your home. So I think if we can get some emphasis on that whole concept of sleeping rooms, young people got it down, right? They're doing this all the time. There's 3 or 4 people living in one house and they're using it as individual sleeping rooms. But this is a way so people can stay in place, make some income, and probably have some help just in terms of maintaining their home as well. Next slide. So the residential center needs to be used by people. We get tons of use, right? We started with 8 people. I have 13 people on staff. The number one thing I think anybody should do who wants to have an apartment in their house is to send us an email at residentialcenter.dcra@dc.gov and set up what is called a preliminary plan review meeting. Don't do anything until you spend $75 and sit down with us. And we will sit with you. We'll figure out what your address is. We will tell you what kind of zoning you have and what you can do in order to have an apartment at your house. So you don't have to know the setbacks and all that kind of stuff. For $75, we'll do it. Don't spend a penny on anybody till you spend that $75 with us. Don't hire an architect, don't hire an engineer, don't hire a contractor. Talk to us first to make sure what you're doing you can do and what you can do. And we can help you develop that. We can help people develop that pathway. I hate it when I hear the stories from people who've been ripped off. One thing, everybody says, oh, we have to lower your basement. That's a $50,000 cost. If your basement has a ceiling of 6 feet 8 inches, I'm going to approve that. And my entire staff will approve that from building permit side. The code says 7 feet, but we have the ability to go down to 6'8". For us, 6'8" can be a very safe place. And then it's also market driven. I have a daughter who's 5'2". She would rent that apartment, right? I have a brother-in-law who's 6'8". He wouldn't think of living in a place that's 6'8". So people don't have to lower their basement if they have ceiling heights of 6'8". And that's most of the ceilings in the District of Columbia. So you don't have to lower those floors because that's extremely expensive. That becomes one of the advantages of doing a preliminary plan review meeting. Next slide. The mayor says hi. And we're here, I always like to use the joke, we're from the government, we're here to help. But we truly are. I mean, it's the mission and purpose of the residential center is to help people. And it really started with trying to figure out how to help people who were poor and old to stay in their homes in the District of Columbia. And everybody on my staff is passionate about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Cheryl. A couple questions. I think we have a few minutes left. If you could go back to the last slide. I think Michael and Cheryl, thank you for clarifying. I think some people believed that the accessory dwelling unit meant that as an older adult, you needed to move into the accessory dwelling unit because it was handicap accessible. So thank you for demystifying that and saying, in fact, that it is another way of bringing people into your house, if you will, and to your property to supplement your income. The slide on 19, if you could open up slide 19 for a second. Cheryl, where would I go to find this homeowner's manual just as a source? Could you type it in the chat maybe, or tell us verbally as well?
Yeah, smartergrowth./ADU should take you there, but I will put that in the chat too.
Thank you very much. And then Michael, on slide, I think it was 29, you had, is that an email address?
Absolutely.
Email address. Is there also a place to go to read up more about what you listed?
Not yet, but right after the first of the year, we'll be rolling out our new website. That really,
fantastic.
That email address is everything at DCRA. I mean, every contact we have goes immediately into our tracking system. And this way we can make sure we have it.
Great, and maybe we could type that as well into the chat so people could grab that from the chat. And is there, you then set up a phone call with them, Michael? Is that the process? They submit a payment, they email you, you submit a payment, and then you set up a time for that discussion.
Correct.
Okay. And there was a question, I believe, in the chat, something about parking. So parking in DC, of course, is pretty tight. How would you go about getting 2 spaces for someone? Or is that for another call?
That's really for those plan review meetings because you don't have to have that for every location in the district.
Okay. Great. I don't see any other chats here with questions other than the resources that we want to have in this chat. So thank you both. And I think, James, are giving you back a couple minutes of your day.
Thank you, Tama. I appreciate that very much. And I hope everyone on the call can appreciate our ability to dig into this one issue in a meaningful way. I think led to wonderful questions from participants. And I think it really shows perhaps the merits of using this different approach, digging into one big item in each pillar instead of trying to do lightning updates on each and every domain. Again, that information in each domain is included in the slides that we're providing available to you. So thank you, Tama, thank you, Cheryl, and thank you, Michael. Wonderful presentation, very actionable information that we can use going forward. And I think we'll all be looking forward to see how things unfold in the future as it relates to accessory dwelling units in terms of funding provided in the fiscal 2022 budget. It's a good transition to our next pillar, pillar 2, which is age-friendly DC pillar 2, changing attitudes about growing older. It's supported by the work of multiple domains, 4 different domains, and those domains include social participation, respect and social inclusion, civic participation and employment, communication, and information. And we're going to begin with an announcement from one of our age-friendly DC task force members, Matthew McCullough. Matthew is director of the Office of Disability Rights. So Matthew, can I hand the floor over to you for an announcement?
Good afternoon, guys. So my name once again is Matt McCullough. I manage the EJ Compliance Office for the DC government, I've been serving in this role for Mayor Bowser since December 2017. As we are responsible for ensuring that folks that are covered under DAA, such as seniors or the aging population, that they have full access to the government services and programs. And so ODR is also responsible for developing and trying to implement the Homestead Community Integration Plan. Homestead, and I'm going to place the actual link for Homestead in the chat box. But Homestead is based on a Supreme Court case that Justice Ruth Ginsburg ruled on, and it was ruled back in 1999. It was based on two citizens that were receiving Department of Behavioral Health Services from the state of Georgia. And at that time, they were placed in a hospital 24/7. And they wanted to be out in the community. And so they challenged the state of Georgia, saying that even though they were receiving Department of Behavioral Health Services, that they still should get their services out in the community, and they shouldn't be placed against their will in a hospital or group home or what have you. And so the Supreme Court Justice ruled that yes, citizens are receiving actual government services that are covered under that has some type of limitation or impairment, should be able to receive government services out in the community, and that it's covered under the DAA that protects our community, including the aging population, because as you may know, as we age, there's a greater risk of all of us being placed in a group home or hospital, and the goal of the government, of the DC government and OER, is to ensure that that citizens, regardless of their age, middle age or older, still are able to be placed in the community with the appropriate supports and services. So throughout this year, I worked with 14 different agencies to develop the Homestead Plan. And it covers 3 different buckets. And it covers employment, healthcare services, and housing. So the reason why we picked those 3 buckets as priorities is that you cannot successfully be independent in the community unless you have access to all 3 buckets of employment, housing, and healthcare. And if one is not working, chances are the other 2 priorities are also impacted. And so, how is this an age-friendly initiative? Well, simply because, you alluded to this earlier, is that then the aging population is definitely at risk of being institutionalized or placed in hospitals or group homes, particularly if you don't have the natural supports from family or friends. As we age, our network of supports tend to grow smaller over time, and without those appropriate natural supports, there is definitely a risk of our citizens in police and group homes or some type of institution by segregated environments. And so what ODR and I did is we worked with several agencies, including the Department of Housing and Community Development, the Department of Human Services, and they oversee all the homeless shelters. We work with the DC Public Libraries, the Department of Transportation. I noticed that Cesar Roberto is on. I noticed that we also work with the Department of Disability Services, the Department of Healthcare Finance, which is the main Medicaid office. We work very closely with the Department of Aging and Community Living and the Department of Behavioral Health. So a lot of these agencies are frontline service agencies that connect with our community members and DC residents and their families. And this plan offers metrics on how each agency is responsible for ensuring that, one, the DC resident remains in their home with the appropriate supports and services, and we offer such programs such as the Save at Home program that the Department of Aging and Community Living offers, and that allows people to modify their own homes so they are more accessible to their needs. And the plan also speaks to how do we properly transition a person who's currently in the hospital or a group home or nursing home or what have you. What exactly does the government do in terms of properly supporting our citizens that are covered under the ADA that may have some type of pyramid limitation, what have you, healthcare issue, that they are given the opportunity to be given that choice to properly transition into the community where they belong. And it's actually much cheaper that people in the community, instead of putting for some care, and that's a win for both the DC residents that may be impacted by being placed in nursing homes or group homes, but it's also a win for the government because we're using those public dollars more effectively to serve people out in the community where they belong. It's not an easy job because you need to coordinate with several different agencies that are responsible for bits and pieces of how we support our citizens in the community. But that's our job as the government to work together, to speak to one another, to understand what the right hand is doing with their left hand. So that's part of the job, what ODR does, and my role in terms of making sure that anybody that wants to remain in the community based on their employment, housing, or healthcare, that they are successfully able to do so with the proper supports of several different agencies coming together. And so each state is responsible for this federal mandate. It's actually a federal mandate, and my agency, on behalf of the mayor, we are responsible for ensuring that one, the plan does exist, and two, that's properly implemented with the coordination of several agencies. So that's what we do. And so I know that there are other partners on this halls such as Caesar, and they can quickly talk about what they're doing, but just realize that there's a great collaboration going on with the community and the government. And without both of them working together in order to do this plan wouldn't mean anything to anybody. So we're also, the government is also dealing with a 10-year lawsuit brought forth by the aging population and the legal counsel for the elderly, because 10 years ago, the government was in a very different place in terms of serving our seniors or aging population to be out in the community. And so we're still dealing with trying to make sure that all our citizens are probably integrated in the community as we to this very day. So that's what Homestead is.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you. And congratulations to you for all the fine work that you're doing and for being such an effective advocate in your role as director of the Office of Disability Rights. An extraordinary body of work. And in particular, congratulations on putting together and working with, across all the government agencies to create the Homestead Plan for 2021 to 2024. I suspect many of us on the call are not familiar with the intricacies of that, but I think we can all agree that enabling individuals living with disabilities to be fully integrated with and a part of a community is what we all want. And so congratulations to you on what you've done. And indeed, the work that you've done is going to make a difference in the lives of all DC citizens residents who are living with disabilities. So thank you and congratulations again. It's wonderful work.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
We now have an opportunity to hear from another one of our task force members about some important work happening. That's Teresa Silla. As you'll soon hear from Teresa, there are parallels in the work of the Interagency Council on Homelessness, also with the Age Friendly DC Task Force. So Teresa, may I hand the floor to you, please?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Can we advance to the next slide? Just anyway, let me just take this moment to quickly introduce myself. I am the newly appointed executive director of the Interagency Council on Homelessness. I assumed this position as of October 4th this year, so quite new. Having said that, I have supported the ICH for a number of years, starting in 2015 as a policy advisor dedicated to the single subsystem. So I have extensive experience with the district's homeless services continuum of care. Just in case it's helpful, I also, just a little bit additional background. I first started my career in affordable housing as a project manager at the City of New Haven. I was working on federal, state, and local subsidies to create affordable rental and home ownership developments. So I really appreciated the presentations earlier about additional dwelling units. I definitely interested and curious about that. I've also spent almost a decade serving as a HUD-funded technical assistance provider, supporting cities, counties, and states with community planning and development programs and funding, including homeless services. So that's the experience that I bring to our homeless services. Next slide, please. it's critical to understand and be grounded in the fact that the homeless services is a safety net for people that are precariously housed, and that it is only designed to respond to those that are experiencing an acute crisis in housing. So we really need to think of this as the emergency room of a hospital. You don't address all health-related needs in the emergency room, that you have all kinds of different wings and tools and areas in a hospital. And so I really think of homeless services as the tip of an iceberg, and underneath that tip lies the affordable housing crisis. Homeless services is not funded at levels that allow us to meet the underlying affordable housing crisis. As many of you likely already know, we have about 40 to 60,000 households who either pay more than half of their monthly income for rent or live in severely inadequate conditions, including severe overcrowding or substandard units. But that's a larger problem that homeless services is not outfitted to support. We, in our continuum, we believe that safe, stable, affordable housing should be a human right and not a privilege. And so you'll see in Homeward DC 2.0, we set out some strategies and objectives to achieve that right. Ideally, every low-income household, we know that every low-income household would benefit tremendously from a permanent housing subsidy, and ideally we would be outfitted to deliver that, but we're not. And so until we get there, we recognize that some people will experience housing crisis, and when they do, we want a crisis response system and a homeless services system that responds quickly, that provides enough assistance to get people back into housing, in a way that recognizes some people, especially individuals and families that have experienced chronic homelessness, have a higher level of need and therefore need deeper levels of rental assistance or case management supports for a longer period of time. Next slide, please. So the vision for Homeward DC 2.0 is to make homelessness in the district rare, brief, and non-recurring, knowing that we are working within this backdrop of an affordable housing crisis. At the heart of this, we know that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and that we should be preventing homelessness whenever possible. And it's and a part of that is diversion at the front door of homeless services, not just monetary assistance, but operating in a crisis mode can really strain a family and friend networks. And so conflict resolution, problem solving support can all be really critical at this front door, diverting people away from homelessness, helping to make sure the experience of homelessness is rare. We want the experience of homelessness to be brief, and that's when our safety net, the emergency shelters, day service centers, and transitional housing can offer safe, secure, and accessible services that then connect people back into housing. So we know that our emergency response needs to be focused on exits into housing, different from helping to manage the experience of homelessness, but instead actually thinking about how do we end people's experience of homelessness. And non-recurring will get there when people are not cycling into and out of homeless services and are adequately supported to maintain their housing once they exit the homeless services system. So that's what our vision is. That's what we're thinking through. I think one last thing that I want to say is homelessness will be rare when we have adequately supported the other safety net systems and services that impact housing instability. And especially, I think we all know that there is an overlap in between the systems that we serve, behavioral health, other institutions like the foster care system and We have a lot of re-entry or returning citizens, and our belief is that homelessness can only really be rare when we have adequately equipped all of the other safety nets and services, and we can prevent people from experiencing housing instability in the same, in the first place. Next slide, please. We know our formula works because we have tried and tested our strategies successfully, especially in the family system, where we have successfully decreased family homelessness. And what you're seeing here is the point in time counts from 2016, the launch of Homeward DC 1.0, the original Homeward DC, all the way to 2020. You can see that gray line is the line that is for persons and families. The count of persons and families has decreased significantly. That's a 73% decrease from 2016 all the way to 2021. We know we need to do the same on the single side. We have not had the same outcomes on the single side because we have not had the opportunity to roll out all of the transformations, the investment, the changes we've made on the family side. So let's go to the next slide and talk a little bit about why we're seeing progress on the family side. So in the family side, the district implemented like a comprehensive set of reforms. What's captured on the chart here is that we have a robust homelessness prevention program, assistance through a central point of intake. Every household entering homeless services has immediate access to rapid rehousing. This is a time-limited subsidy and service that's intended to help people rapidly exit the homeless services system and get back into housing. And then households with more significant barriers and or health challenges are then connected to permanent supportive housing or targeted affordable housing. Both are permanent subsidies, but have different levels of service supports. And so what we have built out on the family side is a progressive engagement model, trying to titrate the amount of financial assistance that we offer, the amount of services that we offer to really meet the needs of the family, to meet them where they are. Progressively ramping up on financial assistance and the social supports and services as families demonstrate like that it's needed. What is not on the chart and is just as important on the family side is that there was a total redesign of shelter facilities and shelter policy. So as many of you already know, DC General closed during this time period and was replaced by new short-term family housing facilities in all 8 wards. And that has really changed the experience of homelessness. The length of stay where people are staying in our shelter facilities or in our short-term family housing facilities have gone down from over a year to less than 90 days. So it's this package of comprehensive and coordinated reforms that leads to the steep reduction in the numbers of families experiencing homelessness. On the single side, next slide, please. What you will see from this chart here is that we are clearly not there on the single side. This is where we need to do a lot of work. So when you compare the level of resources available, and those are the bars on the chart, against the need, and that's the dotted line way up at the top there, what you really see is the level of resources relative to need is quite dismal. So we really need to ramp up on every type of program, especially prevention and rapid rehousing. Where we have made significant investments, that blue bar at the bottom is related to permanent supportive housing. And where we have invested, we see decreases in the chronic count. And so from 2016, if you start at 2016 all the way to 2020, we overall saw an 11% decrease in the count of chronic homelessness compared to that dotted line, that pit line on the top, where the overall count has actually been trending up. So what this shows is when we make the necessary investments, we reap the rewards. What's not on this chart, again, is shelter reform and investments that we're making to our shelter stock. Those transformations will also have a huge impact on our ability to deliver the services that we need and to help people move out of exit homelessness as quickly as possible. The other thing that's not captured on this chart and that we really need to work on is a comprehensive intake system, a streamlined intake system that helps people very quickly navigate to the resources that they need. Right now, we have a no wrong door approach, which sometimes our clients and our providers tell us feels like a no right door approach. Right. And so we need to strike that balance between being accessible and available, but also recognizing that coordination and streamlining is really critical as well. I'll just talk through a couple of other lessons learned. I think I have a little bit more time. What we're finding is that comprehensive reform is actually really important. You can't just do incremental reform to one program at a time. All of the programs and homeless services really work together, work in concert. And so thinking through how to improve all of the programs simultaneously is actually really important. Working smarter is also really important. So we try to have a data-driven approach to think about what are the outcomes we want to achieve and to work smarter, not just harder. Capacity is a challenge, and there are 3 ways in which we've identified capacity as a real kind of issue. There's the capacity of government to run programs all while trying to also improve programs. Those are really difficult to do at the same time. And then I'm seeing a note about the need to talk about the spread of ages as evidenced by the point in time count. Thank you so much, Gail, for that question. Yes, absolutely. That's something that's really significant to this audience. Over 42% of singles in our single system are 55 years and older. And so that's where there's a real connect between the age-friendly initiative and homeless services. There's 20% are actually above 62 years of age, and 21% are between 55 and 61, but collectively kind of 42% of singles are 55 years and older.
All right, thank you, Teresa. Wonderful, wonderful presentation. Thank you for helping us understand how this interagency task force works. We have time for other questions that people may have. If you can throw them into the chat. Melissa, any other questions appeared in the chat?
I haven't seen any. I'm gonna defer to Haley as well. I think you can see everything
on
in
my
the
end.
chat. Sometimes we have a Q&A, which you wouldn't be able to see, but I think you're going to be able to see everything in the chat as it comes up.
Very good. All right, Teresa, what questions should we ask that we haven't asked, in particular as it relates to the intersection between your work and the work of the age-friendly DC task force?
I think there are a lot of things that we could be talking about. One, the vulnerability of particularly the singles population. It's really the prevalence, I think, of substance use, mental health, the dual diagnosis where both are happening. Chronic health conditions are also really important. And so I think care coordination, care management is a place where we really should be how we can work together. I see a question in the chat about the interconnectedness between homelessness and ADUs, and would ADUs help to create more affordable housing, or are there other points of intersection? This is a really interesting question. I wonder, especially as we were earlier in the chat, I saw whether there were any resources to help low-income households create more ADU units. I always wonder whether for that assistance, in the development world, when a developer gets subsidies to create more units, there are opportunities to ask for those units to be affordable units, and for those units to be targeted to people who might be experiencing homelessness or whatever the target population is. And so I wonder if it makes sense to think about, for ADU units, supporting people to convert their ADU units in exchange for making those affordable, and very specifically for targeting people who are experiencing homelessness, that might be a nexus there or some kind of a connection there. The other connection that comes to mind is that ADUs help to stabilize homeowners. And so especially for older homeowners who are on fixed incomes, who are dealing with properties that might be declining in terms of like the physical condition of the building, it might help to actually stabilize people who would otherwise potentially be at risk of homelessness. So that's what like immediately comes to mind. Right, and I see Catherine's comment about that organic connection between aged homeless and our older adults trying to earn more money renting out ADUs. Yeah. I'm not a development expert. I see, and I'm sorry if I'm going to mispronounce Nathalia's question. What about low-income housing tax credits for ADUs? I'm not a low-income housing tax credit expert. It's been a number of years since I've worked with that funding source. And so I would have to defer to our policy advisors at the Department of Housing and Community Development, but it's certainly worth asking. It's a very interesting point to bring up.
All right, well, thank you very much. Very, very helpful. And thank you to everyone who came up with questions, and the intersectionality between our earlier topic and this topic is certainly something that's caught people's attention. So thank you all for that. It's time for us to move on to our third pillar today. And we're going to be hearing from the pillar focused on lifelong health and security. Lifelong health and security. And inside this pillar has multiple domains, including community support and health services, emergency preparedness and resilience, financial security, public safety, lifelong learning, and caregiving. So a big pillar here. And we're going to be hearing from team members over in the area of health, and in particular from, I believe, Kiana Creighton is going to be, I think she's chief of staff there working with Wayne Turnage. I believe she's going to be working to moderate this session. So if I could I turn it over to Kiana to get us started?
Thanks so much, Dr. Appleby, and apologies, everyone. Deputy Mayor Turnage hopefully will be able to join us momentarily, but want to be respectful of everyone's time and ensure that we can make sure to get to the final presentation for this afternoon. So if we could progress to the next slide, please. And I would like to take the opportunity to introduce Dr. Nesbitt, who is the director of the Department of Health, and Dr. Bazran, who's the director of the Department of Behavioral Health. And I actually see the DM just joined, so I'll give him a moment and then I'll pass it along to them. But Dr. Nesbitt and Dr. Bazran, if you would like to add anything else to your introductory remarks, and then we can get started with the questions.
Hello, can you all hear me?
you can DM, I can pass it along to you if you're ready.
I am ready. I was getting ready to apologize for being late, but then I realized I'm early. So Dr. Bazaron and Dr. Nesbitt are on.
Yes, I'm here. I realize, Wayne, that we may not show up
I'm here.
in your queue as speakers.
Okay.
But we're here.
And I'm here also.
I got you. Okay. Well, let me begin by the purpose of this particular panel is to discuss sort of healthcare for all in DC. And I think one of the more challenging issues that we've had to deal with, obviously, over the last 18 or so months is has been the pandemic, and still is the pandemic, and it has greatly affected healthcare access for any number of reasons, and it's created challenges for not only the providers of healthcare, but it's placed a tremendous burden on the district's leaders who are employed to respond to situations like this. And so what I want to do today is to have both Dr. Bazaron, who leads our behavioral health efforts. We have some questions about how they have adapted during the pandemic, but also hear from Dr. Nesbitt, who as the director of the DC Department of Health has been critically responsible for ensuring that the district has a capable response to a pandemic that keeps this population as safe as it possibly can in the midst of the worst pandemic this country has seen in 100 years, and also applying through science science-based decision making that provides a guide to the mayor as to when and how we should reopen the district. So what I want to do is first ask Dr. Nesbitt, given your panoramic view of the impact of this pandemic on this city and the city's response, can you talk a little bit about what you're most proud of with respect to the way that DC Health had to work to stand up a testing operation to facilitate vaccinations, which is still ongoing, and to provide guidance to the mayor on the nature, the depth, scope of the pandemic, and how we should best respond throughout the last 18 months. What are you most proud of?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor Turnage, and thanks to the host of this meeting for inviting us to talk about this critical pillar and to share some insights in terms of things that we've learned over the past several months, but also to really talk about how this is so important for the district that's really focused in terms of being age friendly. And I like to, I think, you've talked about this earlier in your meeting, that being age friendly isn't just about what we do for people who we consider to be seniors in our community, but thinking about things across the life course and creating communities that allow people to be able to live a healthy and fulfilling life through every age and stage and phase of their life. The pandemic and managing a pandemic or any public health emergency is a complex issue. And it requires public health agencies and governmental public health agencies in particular to be doing multiple things at one time. So as Deputy Mayor Turnage has mentioned, we've had the awesome responsibility of doing surveillance and data collection for us to be able to understand how our community was impacted, to what degree or magnitude our community was impacted, which populations and groups were impacted during different phases and stages of the pandemic, and how that would help to inform the different policies that we would recommend to Mayor Bowser for quick and decisive action. And we've also been able to get some things up and running remarkably fast to help to protect the health and well-being of our community. One of them was a public testing effort that remains in place today, that has taken different, that has looked different throughout the pandemic. Even now, we have over 20 plus different locations where residents can pick up a test kit and test themselves, which is a huge transition away from people waiting at 3 huge mass testing sites across the city that we established in March and April of 2020. One of the things that I'm tremendously proud of is how our seniors and people over 65 really showed up for vaccination when we asked them to in the winter of 2020. The district boasts one of the highest vaccine coverage rates for seniors in the country. Nearly 100% of our seniors have received at least 1 dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, and over 85% of them are fully vaccinated. And that's a remarkable accomplishment. And we're seeing great uptake of booster doses in our senior population right now. Those things aren't just numbers that I share for the vaccine coverage itself, but those things have translated into our seniors being more protected from subsequent waves or surges in COVID-19 cases. When we hit a summer surge back in June and July, we did not see high case rates or high numbers of new cases in our seniors. We did not see high rates of hospitalizations among seniors. And those who live in our long-term care facilities, who receive community-based services, live in group homes, weren't as disproportionately impacted as they were in the early phases. And I think that's really something we can all be proud of, because we all came together as a community to make sure that the most vulnerable among us got access to our vaccines and got the information they needed, them and their families, to make wise decisions and choices.
Thank you, Dr. Nesbitt. That's very comprehensive response, and I think it reflects the full breadth of the amazing work that DC Health did. I can't tell you enough how proud I was to sit and watch you direct the COVID activities of the city in a very, very skillful fashion. And I think it has certainly inured to the benefit of the District of Columbia as a whole. Dr. Bazaran, when you think about behavioral health, how have you adapted some of the key services that your staff routinely delivered over the course of the pandemic?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. One of the things that we had to focus on and remain focused on is the mental wellness of all residents within the District of Columbia. And we knew that there was great impact in terms of the pandemic. People experienced trauma, grief, and loss as a result of some of the factors related to the death of loved ones or people they knew, being inside all the time, and so forth. And so one of the things that we had to do was a couple of things. One, make sure that individuals had information around how they could manage their mental wellness. And that included giving tips and tools around everything from how people can stay centered, stay connected with others, because isolation was a big factor, how they might needed to take care of their body and exercise and so forth. In addition to that, one of the things that we did, and I'm very, very proud of our provider network, is that we continue to provide on-site as well as virtual services throughout the pandemic. And a part of how we were able to do this is we received as a district special permission from the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services to allow providers to bill for virtual services that were conducted telephonically as well as visually. And that really allowed people to stay connected to care. We also were able to do some things like, for example, we maintained our services at CPEP. at the ARC and throughout all of our clinics on the ground. I think that it is important to note that during the pandemic, we did see an increase in mental health service utilization because of the ability to use telehealth. And so that was really a lesson learned. The lesson learned was that being able to connect via phone and other telehealth applications was really important. And this was particularly important for those who may not have had the ability to get out and about. We also made 3 sessions, mental health sessions with a mental health professional available through our Access helpline. People didn't need to give any information about themselves. They didn't need to enroll in services, but we wanted to use the lowest barrier possible to make sure that people got the services and supports they needed. And in addition to that, we also had to address the needs of caregivers, those who are providing the services to our population. And so we entered into relationships with Howard University and the Went Center to provide ongoing trauma support to both the healthcare practitioners as well as the behavioral healthcare practitioners who were actually serving the population. We changed some processes also around substance use disorders. We allowed curbside dosing for individuals who, for example, were in methadone treatment, and that allowed people to continue on their medication and to remain in recovery. We also had our community response team on the ground. They were out there in the community helping people through the process. And we also launched a mobile van that was available to deliver services where people were and to get them the services they need. The other thing that was very important, and we followed the direction of Dr. Nesbitt as our health officer and the mayor, and we provided ongoing information regarding the status of the pandemic, where people should go for testing and receive vaccine, and made sure that our provider network and others were aware of the requirements so that we could all stay safe. And I think that this was really important. I met with providers on a weekly basis to make sure that we could address any issues that happened. And here again, it was important for us to address the full continuum of age ranges and to make sure that we met people where they were and got them the services and supports that they needed.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Bazran. I want to move quickly to part 2 of this panel and talk a little bit about how the goals, the longstanding goals of age-friendly DC have been integrated into the work of DC Health and DBH over the course of this pandemic and maybe even before. Dr. Nesbitt, if you could start by talking about how your offices, any offices within the department, how they consider the issue of aging when they develop their program frameworks. And also when you discuss that, if you could talk about whether or not there exist gaps in your mind that we would need to address going forward to assure more deeper integration of aging-related services.
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, for the sake of time, I'll just kind of be sort of brief and talk about one of the things that we have done historically and are embarking upon now, and that's as it relates to our healthy people planning or framework that we use to help create goals for the district across a broad and wide array of health behaviors, health issues that all of the community and other district government agencies
I'm on the call.
Can rally around. And so what we have been able to do is to be more focused on sort of these broader system approaches that we know align very much so with the broader goals of age friendly. And one of those chief things that we're lasering in on in this phase, in a more specific way, we've done some work in this area over the past 3 or 4 years, is health literacy. We know that health literacy is not a stable concept or stable construct for people. It's often linked to your degree of educational attainment. But as the tools that people use to either access healthcare or to interact with health professionals change and become more dynamic, it's important for people to be able to have a degree of health literacy that allows them to get the true benefits of those tools. So I often tell people to think about health literacy in different domains, right? So that there's the health literacy that we need to have that helps us understand our health benefits or our health insurance. So you can imagine that when you're 17, 18 years old, you're getting ready to go away to college, someone may have to teach you how to use your health insurance, to know what's in network so you don't go to the emergency room all the time, that you learn how to get a primary care doctor, or how you're gonna, when you're away at college, right, and your parents aren't making those appointments for you, how do you use your healthcare and your health insurance? On the other end of the spectrum, there are some new interests or new needs that come into play when you are shifting away from your employer-sponsored insurance and you need to navigate Medicare for the first time. So having a good idea of what it means, health literacy means for understanding health benefits is important. Then we have how to navigate the health system, right? So our health needs tend to change as we get older. So having basic preventive services, how to use those services and when to need those services. A lot of young people think I only need to go get some health services or healthcare when I don't feel well. And they neglect the need for preventive services. As we get older, our needs for health services tend to increase for some people, and who to go to for which things may become more complex. And we may have to have more people working together to better manage our care so we don't have, duplication of services, we're not taking more medications than we should, or we may have more care transition needs, right? So moving from a hospital to a long-term care facility for rehab, and then getting back home and receiving the home and community-based services we need. So really being able to help people understand the health ecosystem is so critically important. And then the last domain of health literacy that I think is important, and maybe what much more people default to, is how do the health behaviors that we have at any stage of our life impact our overall health? So what are the types of foods that we eat that have an impact on our health and well-being? How does our level of physical activity have an impact on our health and well-being? How does the consumption of tobacco products and alcohol, all of those things have an impact on our health and well-being, as well as the management of stress. And Dr. Basron has mentioned this. So all of those things are critical parts of health literacy. I think it's a really timely opportunity for us to be talking about health literacy. Dr. Basron mentioned the use of telehealth services. That radically changes how people interact with the health system. So we need to make sure that people have the ability to use those tools, which again is a foundational part of health literacy. So we're really excited about focusing on a health literacy plan for the District of Columbia as part of our Healthy People 2030 planning, and are excited to be able to take that journey with our community.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Nesbitt, and we will certainly look forward to all of the developments that you mentioned going forward. I think they offer some exciting opportunities for programming that will certainly contribute to the efforts of age-friendly DC. Dr. Basron, before we move to the last part of the panel discussion, can you talk briefly about how DBH integrates aging into behavioral health services and system redesign?
Yes, certainly. Thank you for that question. First of all, I'd like to begin by saying that DBH during FY21 served over almost 10,000 individuals ages 55 to 101 years of age. in our service delivery system. And these individuals receive both mental health as well as substance use clinical care, clinical services, care coordination, which I cannot tell you how important that is. That care coordination is important because we find that individuals, particularly older individuals, can fall through the cracks in the system if they are not connected to care and there isn't that follow-up that happens through care coordination. Also, supportive community services, including peer supports and recovery services were offered, as well as intensive services like assertive community treatment, rehabilitation day treatment, which gives people a useful place to go during the daytime, as well as crisis emergency service. We also implemented complex case conferencing to ensure that both primary and behavioral healthcare services were coordinated and integrated. And this is extremely important with individuals who are older adults, because one of the things we know from the literature is that individuals, particularly those with serious mental illness, experience 25 years of life loss due to physical health issues, not to behavioral health issues. So we really have to pay attention to both of those and make sure that we have an integrated approach to service delivery. Also, I think that it's really important to note that we are in the process of carving in behavioral health care services into Medicaid managed care. And the purpose is to better align primary care and behavioral health care services so that we treat the whole person, which is critically important for this population. And the goal is to have better health outcomes, a better customer experience, and certainly a lower cost of care. We also note that age has been a variable that we have identified within the opioid epidemic. We've noted that African-American males over the age of 50 have been disproportionately affected by fentanyl that's entered the heroin supply, and unfortunately have been the majority of individuals who have lost their lives. And we know that 76% of all of the fatal overdoses occurred in people 40 to 69, with the highest group being between that 50 to 59-year-old group. As a result of that, we know that, and we have provided peer support services and increased the number of peer supports that are available at various points within the service delivery system. This includes things like when somebody goes into an emergency room, or if someone goes into another treatment session. We also want to make sure that trauma has been addressed across the board, because we have trauma-focused services that have been utilized for every population of service throughout the lifespan. In addition, one of the things that we will be doing and have done is we have increased the amount of resources that are going to care coordination. We are developing this year 7 additional care coordination teams to connect and reconnect individuals to care who have an opioid use disorder or a stimulant use disorder, most of whom who are over the age of 50.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Bazaran. We've approached the third and final phase of the panel. And what I would like for the two of you to do is to take us to the question and answer session by first discussing what innovation do you think your agencies will be applying over the next year to continue to make the district a better place in which to age. Dr. Nesbitt, you can start, and Dr. Bazran, you can follow her, and then we'll be prepared for any question, and we'll be prepared for a question and answer period.
I'll emphasize again, I think one of the best things that we can do for our community is to ensure that people have the right tools to be able to understand what makes them achieve their optimal health in terms of how they utilize the health system, what types of health behaviors will ultimately lead to them having better health outcomes at every phase and stage of their life. We continue to engage with many of our health and human services agency partners to ensure that we have the right types of programs and services in place. We continue with our Healthy Brain Initiative, which we were very, I would like to say, adamant about not having be about Alzheimer's, but having it be about healthy brain. So what is it that we should be doing again around every stage of our life to be able to protect our brain health and preserve our brain health and be able to respond to any cognitive impairment that people may begin to have. So I think those types of things are some of the critically important things that we need to be doing. Sometimes when we use the word innovation, people are looking for something brand new. And I think when we say brand new, we need to also be reimagining or reviewing some of the initiatives or approaches that we've used in the past that haven't yielded the results that we would have hoped that they would yield. So you'll see even more of that from us as we look at the post-pandemic future in terms of how healthcare has been utilized, how public health services have been utilized. We're going to be working with all of our community partners to continue to try to meet people where they are. And I'll underscore, as Dr. Bazran mentioned, and Deputy Mayor Turner, you'll relate to this as well. DC had a tough go at really getting people to use telehealth, not the concept of telehealth, right? Like people understood telehealth was important. They knew it was part of the future, but there was sort of like this resistance to really big adoption of telehealth that people didn't have the right technology at home. It was gonna fail. We didn't have the right broadband access. And then the pandemic happened and we had no choice but to use telehealth. And we saw telehealth being utilized across all age groups and across all demographics in the district, whether we're talking about audio only or audio visual only. And it's led to many of our community-based service providers being very creative about what the future of their service delivery would look like. And they've had increased participation in some of their programs now that they have a virtual option. So I think that type of review and innovation is something that we can continue to look forward to meet people where they are.
All right.
Dr. Nesbitt, Dr. Bazran?
Oh, okay. Yes, telehealth is here to stay. Let me just put that out there. Telehealth is here to stay. And the Department of Behavioral Health continues and will continue to utilize telehealth and expand telehealth. And some of the things that why we think it's really important is that way it allows people to access behavioral health services from wherever they are, in their homes or in other places. And let me tell you some of the things that I'm excited about. We are going to establish 10 telehealth stations with navigator support at peer-led centers and at accessible community sites throughout the city. One of the things that we found is that people, as Dr. Nesbitt said they didn't have the equipment or they couldn't use the equipment. And so these telehealth stations will be set up so that if somebody is, really needs somebody to help them through the process, they will be there to do that and they will be located. In addition to that, 4,150 enrollees in behavioral health services will be provided not only equipment, telephones, but also internet access so that we can maintain the continuity of care and improve their health outcomes. And it also will help us with adherence support. We can call somebody and see if they have taken their medication, to see if they have any concerns about managing their illness and so forth. We can provide them with text messages and so forth. So I think this is really, really important. The other thing that we are doing is we will continue curbside dosing as long as we are allowed by SAMHSA, and take-home dosing so that people can continue to receive their medication if they have a substance use disorder. We also have stood up some SUD quarantine beds so that people can quarantine to make sure that they don't have COVID before they go into residential care. And we will maintain that process until, quite frankly, Dr. Nesbitt tells us we don't need to do that anymore, but because we want people to be safe and we want them to be able to go into care. We also are redesigning our entire crisis behavioral healthcare system to provide alternatives to law enforcement and to make sure that people get the right service at the right time from the right people. A couple of things specifically that we are going to do looking at the population of focus for age-friendly DC. And one of the things we're doing is we are going to be piloting a new tool, a potential tool to assess mental illness, the impact of mental illness on daily living skills. It's the Daily Living Activities Functional Assessment. Many of you may know that. And it's really intended for people all across the spectrum, but particularly would give us an opportunity to identify the impact of one's mental illness or behavioral health concern on their ability to maintain their daily life living activities. And then we can provide the plan to wrap those services and supports around them. We also are looking at implementing an evidence-based practice, the illness management and recovery service, which is an evidence-based practice that is really designed to provide people with knowledge and skills necessary to cope not only with mental illness, but also to maintain their recovery goals and to be able to do some self-care. So I think we have a lot going on right now in terms of the delivery of services to individuals, particularly focused on even getting into long-term care facilities and congregate settings and making sure that the individuals who are there have the range of services and supports that they need to function effectively. And so that's a preview of some of the things we're doing. I'm really excited, however, about our moving forward. And as Dr. Nesbitt said, moving on through the pandemic to the next phase of development and taking those lessons learned with us that really will improve not only service delivery, but access to care, continuity of care, and engagement.
Thank you, Dr. Bazron, and thank you, Dr. Nesbitt. I mean, extraordinary work throughout the most difficult of times. Thank you for everything you've done to help protect the citizens of the District of Columbia and help us think about how health can be more equitably distributed across the entire population. Deputy Mayor Turnage, we're going to transition over into the open public comment section, but you get the last word. What would you like to make sure to say as we transition into the next phase?
Well, you know, I fully support and agree with all of the initiatives that both the DC Health and DBH are pursuing in regards to making this city an easier place in which to age. But I will tell you, my biggest focus remains on making sure that this pandemic does not boomerang and create significant problems for those who are unvaccinated and even for those who are vaccinated. I mean, the vaccines give us amazing protection, but they're not foolproof. And particularly for our elderly population, we have to be very careful that even those who are fully vaccinated with a booster, that we protect them as much as we can from any infection that could put them at risk because of underlying conditions. So my focus is more in the near term and sort of watching Dr. Nesbitt, work her magic to make sure that we don't end up with high infection rates among our most vulnerable citizens.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And thank you for hosting this panel. It's been greatly appreciated. Thank you for spending the time here with the Age-Friendly DC Task Force. Your leadership is greatly, greatly appreciated.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
We now have some time. If there are any questions, Melissa, have any questions come in from the public that we need to address? I haven't seen any in the chat, but you're monitoring more closely.
We haven't seen any either. But people could raise their hand using the reaction tab at the bottom, or they can put a comment or question in the chat box.
All right.
I'm going to stop sharing the screen so we can just see everyone.
Well, if there aren't, I don't see any questions coming up at this point. Oh, sorry.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Hi, this is Michelle Johnson from the DC Office of the State Superintendent of Education. I wanted to know whether or not the District of Columbia has actually provided the type of update that was just provided by Mr. Turnage and the other two representatives about what has transpired, and has it been shared with residents of the District of Columbia via DC cable television or other types of communication? And if it hasn't, it would be phenomenal if it was. I think that the presentation gives us a lot of food for thought, not just for now, but how to move forward in the future. So that was just my question.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that comment. And certainly, it's a lot of important information has been shared here. I don't know whether or not what other formats it may have been shared in. I can't speak to that. I don't know if Deputy Mayor or Kiana want to address that.
We have not broadly shared the presentation or the material in the presentation. What we will do is certainly load this presentation on the Deputy Mayor's office website, and we will send out a communication to all the stakeholders about the presentation and make it certainly available upon request.
This is Judge Cheryl. I put a question in the chat, but I guess nobody saw it. I just wanted to direct this to the Department of Behavioral Health. Do you all still do the community trauma trainings that you had started at one point? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, Dr. Bergeron, I think you're on mute.
My apology, I was talking away at any rate. Yes, as a matter of fact, we did trauma training through the Went Center throughout the pandemic, and people really enjoyed that. In addition to that, we also provided trauma training through our parent support program that was available to parents of our children within the district.
Okay, now how does one find out about when you all are going to be doing those trauma training?
Right, you can find out on our website, or certainly you can contact me directly and I can point you in the right direction.
Thank you. If you could put your contact information in the chat, I'll take it down. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's. I think we probably are at a stage, Melissa. We should go on just as a reminder for all task force members, if you want to post the important dates coming up in December and beyond. If you want to put the slides back up again, that slide. We do have some pillar meetings. If you're involved in one of the pillars, those dates are shown here on the slide. December 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, pillar 1, 2, and 3 are meeting. So if you're involved in those activities, please make note of that. And then importantly, please note Tuesday, May 17 and Tuesday, November 15 of next year for our age-friendly DC task force meetings. We've covered a lot of ground here. We started off by hearing about the amazing work that GW is doing to create this whole age-friendly ecosystem regionally. We heard from the DC accessory dwelling units and robust discussion there about how that impacts the aging population. Matthew McCullough, Director of the Office of Disability Rights, gave us an update on the Homestead Plan for 2021 to 24. We heard a briefing from the Interagency Council on Homelessness, and again, how that intersects with the aging population. And finally, Deputy Mayor Turnage hosted a conversation on healthcare for all in DC. We covered a lot of ground. I think a lot of important information has been shared. And all this, again, will be available on the Age Friendly DC website as well. So thank you all for your participation today. And thank you for the fine work you do day in and day out to help DC become a better place for individuals to age across their life course. Have a great day. Stay safe out there.
Thank you.
Bye
You
now.
have a great day as well.